And welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts, MMA Creative Vice President, Democratic Operative Mike Kopp, and heard daily on 1510 WLAC, syndicated talk show host Steve Gill. Welcome to see you both. Happy Friday to you as we tape our show. Interesting week as we watch what went on before the Supreme Court. 3 days of oral arguments on the president's health care reform law. Now we wait. And really, if you listen to it, and a lot of folks did, it seems the central argument was what we thought it was going to be, the individual mandate, and the question, if that goes away, does it kill the whole law?
I think the interesting piece of the arguments is that, as you point out, everybody pretty much knew what was coming, apparently, except the Solicitor General, who seemed shocked and stunned by the questions he was asked about the slippery slope of if you can require people to buy health insurance, can you buy them, require them to buy broccoli, cell phones, cars, whatever else. And the fact that the government was so poorly prepared for the argument that you knew was coming, I think showed that perhaps there's not a lot of strength to the argument. That and the fact that on Monday, they were having to argue that it was a tax to enforce the mandate, not a fine, because that's the only way it could fit their argument. And then Tuesday they were arguing it was a fine and not a tax. I think that really hurts your argument with very smart people on the Supreme Court.
But I would agree. I think the preparation on the government side was pretty bad. I mean, if
they looked bad.
If you think about it, I mean, the Solicitor General is wanting to argue the intricacies of how they put the deal together and why. And a number of the justices, including Scalia, they wanted to argue just fundamentally, does the government even have a role in this? And the Solicitor General couldn't address that. He wanted to more stay with the intricacies of the law, which is not where the debate. So you had two different messages going at the same time, and they were like ships that were just passing in the night.
Can we agree there are some good aspects to this law? Allowing health insurance for people who have pre-existing conditions is a good thing. People should be able to get health care coverage. But then it also does increase the cost to states here in Tennessee. We heard, again, former Governor Bredesen again saying, as he did in office, he opposes this, thinks it's bad because it will be a burden on the states. Is there a compromise? Is there a middle ground so people can find health care coverage at a reasonable cost, and also so it doesn't burden the states?
I think there are ways to get there, and you've had folks that have been arguing, let's have cross-border health insurance availability.
We had
the portability laws, the Kennedy-Kassebaum bill years ago, that would allow you to take your health insurance from one job to another. That doesn't help as much when you're paying COBRA payments after you've lost a job. But I think the other issue is, should we be doing this at the state? And that's been the argument on whether the Massachusetts version versus the federal version makes sense. You're right. If we're not going to require some coverage for people, their own responsibility, then should we be covering everybody that walks into the hospital unlimited no matter what? And we've got to make that decision as a society. Are we going to tell people if you don't buy your own health insurance, you don't get coverage, or are we going to require people to get health insurance?
I think most people would agree that access to health care is an important factor in all this. But what scares me is justices saying maybe we should take this. Even the liberal justices, who I would agree with on many issues, are saying let's let Congress fix it. Congress is the one that broke this to begin with. You can't get consensus on anything. That's what concerns me about this.
You heard from Beth Usselson. Do you agree, if this goes away, whether you agree or disagree with this particular law, that a lot of people will lose their health care coverage and may not be able to get health care coverage?
Well, when you look at the Congressional Budget Office, they say 20 million people will lose their health insurance if we keep it in place. It's already costing us 2 and 3 times what they told us when they were putting it in effect. So this is not the cure. And in fact, there are a lot of indications that it'll make it worse rather than better. And I think Ms. Usselton is frankly not being honest when she's pointing out that people will lose their health insurance if it goes away, without recognizing that people will lose their health insurance if it is kept in place.
I think the fact is we're still looking at 40 million Americans that don't have access to health insurance and health care because of pre-existing conditions, because they can't afford it. We've got to do something about that. This is not a problem we can sweep under the rug. My concern again is this having to go back to Congress. That means we're looking at years of delay again.
I think we're also, though, missing the point. It is not denial of access to health care. People have access to health care. If you go to the emergency room today, you will get covered. What you don't have access to is unlimited first-rate care if you're not paying for it, or if you haven't gone and bought sort of the basic health insurance coverage, sort of the safety net coverage, which, interestingly, Obamacare bans. The ability to go get that high-deductible, low-cost health insurance is one of the things it does away with, which is what most people need.
But I think we would agree that letting people just go to the emergency room is not the long-term solution.
No, and it's expensive.
I mean, it's going to bankrupt the healthcare system, which it's done in many cases.
How much of an impact is this decision when it comes June, earlier, whenever, going to have on the upcoming November presidential election. This is the president's signature piece of legislation. If this is shot down, is it really a shot across the bow to his credibility and what he's been able to accomplish during his first term?
We've got James Carville arguing that this will be great because then the Republicans own the health care system as it is. I don't think that's the case. This is the signature plan. The Obama administration has actually embraced it as Obamacare. And if it gets taken away, there is literally nothing he can point to that has been a, quote, success in his first 4 years.
I'd like to believe the president would love to see this thing move forward. If it doesn't, then I would absolutely agree with James Carville. I think what happens is we have then the debate focusing on what do we do with the 40 million Americans who don't have access or can't afford health care. That's frankly a great political issue for the Democrats. Again, though, I don't believe the president really wants to see that happen.
Let's talk a little bit about the GOP presidential primary. Getting testy out there among the three candidates remaining. Gingrich seems to be really running on fumes. His campaign hurting in money, hurting in momentum, way back in the delegate count. Romney and Santorum kind of going after each other a little bit. Where are we as we start heading into the home stretch as it is?
I think Romney's had his worst times. As you move ahead, you've got Wisconsin coming up on Tuesday, you've got Maryland coming up. As you look at the states that are going to come up in April, looks much better for Mitt Romney than the previous states have done. He still has a difficult time getting to the 1,144, but Rick Santorum has to get 75% of the remaining delegates to get to his count to win. That's not going to happen. All he can do is make trouble for Romney.
I still see that we're going to have a brokered GOP convention. I mean, I agree that Romney has the momentum. Romney will have the delegates. Romney will get the nomination, but it's going to be an ugly convention. There's factions of the Republican Party that are so far apart on fundamental issues, I don't see them coming together.
Romney kind of seems to believe that, or maybe not saying it publicly, but is saying publicly it's not necessarily good for the GOP to win in November if this drags on and on and on. In other words, hinting Santorum, Gingrich, please get out and let's get this over with.
And that's the pitch that you're seeing from some of the leaders in the Republican Party as well as from Mitt Romney. I think the other interesting thing is, what do you do with the delegates that got taken away from some of the early states because they moved up their primaries? States like Michigan and Florida. Those are two key battleground states in the fall. I'm not sure you really want to deny those Republican delegates to those states, and if you award them, that raises the bar of how many delegates Romney needs. If he tries to fight that, he's fighting against states he's going to need in the fall. So I think, again, this could be very messy, as was pointed out.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be messy, but I also think this is going to be a tight race before it's all said and done in November, because we still have these super PACs, these ability for people like the guy that's been bankrolling Newt Gingrich for so long. We don't know what kind of impact that's going to have on a general election because we've never seen anything like that.
Steve Gill, Mike Kopp, appreciate your time and your insight. Stay with us. This week continues in a moment.